welcome to the Security Cocktail Hour. I'm Joe Patty.
I'm Adam Roth.
And I'm Rob Lee.
It is great to have you on today, everyone. We have Robert Lee, the CEO of Dragos, which is a very cool and interesting company. And we're glad you can make it because I was looking stuff up. You have been to Davos and testified before Congress and everything, and I'm glad you accepted our invitation to come up to the big time on the Security Cocktail Hour here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to what this is going to do for me. I appreciate it, and I always like spending time with folks that are out trying to do stuff in the community. I like the community piece of it. You guys are out talking to a lot of folks, and again, keeping it real and trying to have some fun. Security's a grind, everyone knows it, and people get burned out way too easily. So to have a little fun and talk about it all and not let it be so overbearing, that's good. So I appreciate the invite.
Well, thanks for coming. And we try to keep it interesting too, because your field is something a little bit different from what a lot of security people and what people like us are usually into, the operational technology side. So we're going to hear a bit about that. But first, let's do a little business on the cocktail side. What do we got today?
Yeah, well, for me, it's so I'm always a gin and tonic fan. Today is Botanist, which is super classic. I think my go-to is more like Brockman's, but Botanist is a great one. As long as it's Fever Tree Tonic, it's all good.
Cool. Okay, I've got something. It was I forgot what it was. Came in a blue bottle. Harmon or not Harmon?
There's a bunch of different ones in a blue bottle. Was it like a craft one?
Yeah, it was kind of fancy.
Side or something? Yeah, okay. I mean, there's like the whale one that's in a blue bottle.
Did you say blue bottle, Joe, or blue pill?
No, not the blue pill. The blue. It's a blue bottle. No, with like an elk or something on it. I don't know.
Oh, okay. No, I don't think I've seen that one.
Anyway,
if you're interested, look, there's a lot of good gin out there. Don't get me wrong, but my favorite in the world for G&Ts would be Brockman's. It's out of London, and it's got like a blackberry current to it. It's just cool. It's perfect for a G&T. If you want like a really good cocktail one, I would go for Bee's Knees. It's out of Vermont, surprisingly, and it's just honey and juniper, so it's real crisp.
Really? Wow, that's intense. So what do you got there, Adam?
Yeah.
I listen. Don't make fun of me, man. I grabbed whatever was near. I took it from my wife. I was watching.
Well, at least the beer is all you took from your wife. That's cool.
Yeah, I was watching a comedy thing, and it was like laughing about like White Claw, how it's a gateway drink. So maybe this is a little step up against White Claw.
Hey man, there is nothing wrong with whatever you drink, whether it has alcohol content or not. This whole this is an unmanly drink, whatever it is, that's some crazy stuff from marketing. Like, you enjoy your drink and it's good for you, man.
That's true. Well, cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
All right. And before we forget, we got to be better podcast hosts. Please follow us on Spotify or wherever you're listening. Please, on YouTube, like, subscribe, hit the thumbs up. I didn't get the special effect this time. Comment. Please, we're trying to do some great shows for you guys. So let us know how we're doing. We want to hear from you.
Isn't that wild, though, like how much creators put effort into creating stuff and how very little feedback? I used to run this comic. I need to probably start it again, Little Bobby's comic. And I ran it I wrote this book when I was in the military, Skated at me, a book for children management. And later, when I was just teaching at SANS, threatened telling me a book for children and analysts. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't think anybody would read them. I mean, the book sold well, but the comic I did every Sunday, and I never saw anything. And I stopped it one day after 13 years, and I got hundreds of emails of, "Hey, why'd you stop? It was great, whatever." I'm like, where were you guys the last 13 years?
Yeah, right. The Delta.
So it's like,
wow.
Yeah. So for the people listening, I'm flying in and flying out, but yeah, absolutely. Like, tell the people that you enjoy their content.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, when we started this, I was worried about, the backlash, the embarrassment. Is it going to be terrible? Now I realize hate mail is like a privilege. I mean, you'll take anything, right?
Yeah. My favorite piece of feedback I ever got of that book, again, I was in the military. I was frustrated, and so I wrote a children's book, but it was for a couple generals that were pissing me off, and I just published it on Amazon. Didn't think it would go well. It didn't sell like 10,000 copies or some crap, but like,
God bless.
So it went wild, but like at the time it was just a joke, and it was literally titled "Skated and Me: A Book for Children and Management." And my favorite review is on Amazon. There's like a 1-star review, and he's serious. It's not a joke. He's serious. Of like, I read this book and I can't even tell what the target audience is supposed to be. And I'm like, it's in the title.
So, so I want to understand. You said skater, right? Skater and me.
Yeah,
So let
yeah,
me ask you a
yeah.
question. Did you have like little centrifuges and stuff like
Yeah, yeah.
that?
No, I mean, like, it was such an abstract joke book because what had happened is, so I was in the NSA at the time, but I was an Air Force officer, but I was at the NSA, and I got called down to a combatant command. I was stationed in Germany, and they called me in to ask me like how to attack this foreign government and this stuff. I was like, man, I don't agree with that. Like, all my work is defensive. Like, one of the reasons I took this mission was and built this mission was keep people out of civilian infrastructure. But when you're uniform, you're like, okay, fine, whatever. And so I showed up and I briefed them. It was like I prepared like a 5-hour presentation on here's every component of their system, here's every detail, here's how you do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was like, I wouldn't do it if I were you. Ethically, I think it's gray, but if you need to, here's how to do it safely. It's the whole like here, safe sex conversation. I hope you
Yeah.
don't, but here's how you do it if you
If you
do.
got to, yeah.
And at the end of the presentation, all these operators were supposed to be the APT, right? The U.S. government going after. One of the guys raised their hand, was like, great, great, great. 5 hours in, by the way. So what does SCADA stand for? I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, just like you haven't even Googled the term. And so I angrily on the train ride home wrote this book, and I contacted a buddy of mine who was like this engineer, did drawing on the side. I was like, can you draw this? And it was only ever intended. I published it on Amazon just so I could buy my own copy, so I could put it on the general's desk.
Yeah.
And I said,
Mhm.
next time you want to call my team, read this first. And it was, as a captain in the military, like, that's very flippant, but like I was done. And I forgot to delist it on Amazon, and then it just went wild.
Oh my god. Dude, yeah.
So it's like skater for dummies.
Yeah, it was kind of, but there's nothing you could learn from that book. It was very flippant, but I get people now that send me pictures. I'm reading my kid this book on Christmas, and it's adorable then, but like the context, the book is fine, but as context, I'm like, oh, all right.
Did you have a following back then? That's that why people bought it, or just pure people
There was,
Googled it and found it on
yeah,
Amazon and
it was
bought it?
Google. Yeah, it was Googling at that time, because like the amount of, so we talk about industrial, and I think we're going to talk about in this
Yeah, sure.
episode as well, like operation technology, industrial control systems, and like it's in vogue now. But go back just 15 years, nobody was talking about it. It was like a very small community could fit around a fireplace kind of discussion. And so I think I had one of 2 or 3 books that even mentioned SCADA in a security context that was out. And so people were trying to look, and they found this children's book, this comic book, but they got the joke, and it sort of went wild from there. And especially the electric community, the asset owners and operators, people running the companies, they thought it was hilarious because they were trying to explain stuff. And I remember it kind of crossed the threshold. It was like jump the shark when I had a general in the White House call me and tell me, and I was still in. And he's like, Captain, this is hilarious. I keep it on my book. I keep it on my shelf. And I keep it on my desk for when the management comes in. I was like, sir, you're a 2-star general. How high do you need to be to realize you are the management?
Let me,
Oh
is it
my
still on
god.
Amazon? Because I'll buy it. I want it autographed.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah. I'll get you a copy or something. But
Well,
yeah, I've got 3 now. This is that. Let's talk about the company. No. Here's my books. Yeah, no. It's
well,
kind
I
of like
think
my wares, but yeah.
I think this is really interesting because I've tried to dabble. From what I understand, like if you think getting people to watch a podcast is tough, like self-publishing on Amazon is like impossible. Getting anyone to even see it or buy it or whatever, you're like some kind of natural
Anomaly.
entrepreneur or something, man.
Yeah.
If you did that,
Look,
wow.
I think I'm not the stupidest person in the world when it comes to industrial, but let's be real. There's a time and place aspect to it.
Yeah, I guess so.
So because I walked in, I mean, I'm not that old. I walked in 2010 timeframe to the NSA and said, hey, what are y'all doing on industrial? They're like, go find the unknown unknowns. I'm like, sorry, all right, we're talking about each other. What now? They're like, your mission is to find the unknown unknowns. I'm like, who's in charge? I'm like, you are. I'm like, I'm in charge of what? like the unknown unknowns. I'm like, what does that mean to you? And they're like, we don't know, but Rumsfeld's really into it.
Oh God.
Like, what the shit is this?
Oh.
And so they said, go find the state actors like doing stuff that we're not aware of. I'm like, I still don't know what you want me to do. And they're like, dude, just here's access to everything we have in the intelligence community. Go have fun. I was like, what are you doing on industrial? And they're like, what's industrial? And I'm like, what are you doing on control systems? Like, what are control systems? Like, it's everything that has interaction with physics. And they're like, I don't
Physics.
think we're doing anything on it. And I'm like, okay, that's my mission set. And so me building and leading the government's team on industrial was because no one else was doing it. It wasn't like, Rob, you're so special. Here you go. It was literally no one was doing it. And so like I just got to build it. And so I think the same thing with the Amazon thing. At the time, it wasn't a topic. And so if you Googled SCADA in 2013, my book was like the number one Google hit room. So it's just a time and place thing, I think.
So I want to add to that really quick, right? Number one, I probably would never know what OT or IoT was until Joe put me in charge of doing NAC. So I did NAC, and I was like pulling the hair. Yeah, I had hair at one point, pulling the hair out of my head, trying to figure out how to get these devices on, how to
Yeah.
microsegment it, how to make sure they don't get on the network, how to whitelist these devices. And here's
And
the other
by the
thing
way,
about
it was punishment. But
it
anyway.
was punishment. Let me tell you, you don't even know. You don't even know because I was dealing. I want to be very careful what I say. I was dealing with people who had no clue. And then the second thing I want to tell you is I walked up to a couple of 8200 guys. I'm like, hey guys, if I wanted to compromise a centrifuge and spin it really fast, then spin it really slow, how would I do that? They go, why are you asking me?
Yeah, look, man, the physics wins at the end of the day, and I think there was a desire to talk about OT. So let me maybe simplify it real quick. OT really is just whatever computing and networking systems are around physics. That's really what it comes down to. There's all these wonderful things in the world of IT, and they accelerate the company. If you want to advance the company and you want to take advantage of whatever buzzwords you want to use, like digital transformation, whatever, you're tapping into all the power that IT can provide. But let's not forget the reason the business is in business is the OT. The reason Pfizer exists is OT. The reason Southern Company exists is OT. The reason Dow Chemical exists is OT. OT is the physical process and the computing and networking around it. Sometimes it's a Windows system. Sometimes it's a purpose-built controller built in 1970. It's it's all those weird stuff, but it all relates to the physical process. And so, what's interesting to me is IT security presents a lot of opportunity, but IT security going to the plant and telling them what they have to do is misunderstanding. The plant's the reason you're hired. The mission is the operations. Now, the operations can't stick their head in the sand and go, "We're going to connect to the cloud and do all these things and screw you guys." Nah, you got to do both, and both have value. But the operations side of the house is 100% the reason that my kids have lights and water. It's 100% the reason that I got an employee. It was one of the best days. I got an employee that called up a customer to sell to them that made the insulin he was taking as a diabetic.
Oh,
Oh wow.
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 It's just
Wow.
it's
Full
this
circle.
personal relationship, you know.
Wow.
And our operations folks get shit on. Let's not talk sideways about it. Everybody yells at the power company. Everybody yells at the manufacturer. Everyone yells at the oil company. My whole point is the world runs because of industrial. We want to do it cleaner. We want to do it more efficient. We want to do it safer. The world runs because of industrial. Everybody outside of banks, and even banks have building automation, but that's just, whatever. I got asked one time by venture capitalists. Dragos has done decently well, and that I've raised, I don't know, 440 million or so for the company, and every investor always asks me, "What's the TAM of industrial? What's the total addressable market?" And I'm like, I don't know, man. Physics,
Everything.
like
Yeah.
it's everything. And so if you take that lens of we are here because there's communities who depend on us. We are here because there's a mom and a pop and a kid and whatever else that need this shit to work. Then everything becomes a little more crystal clear on how do we partner together to do it. And everything else usually is just weirdness between teams for almost no reason whatsoever.
Not only do you need it to work, we need to protect it, right? And it's
Yep.
funny because I wrote when I did my master's, I did it on ethical warfare, and what people
Yeah.
don't realize is that that nation state that might be doing, or the threat actor that might be doing that attack, they're removed. It's almost like being a drone operator without the screen, right?
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah.
know. They know what they're doing, but they're removed. They're not on the ground, charging a hill. And you don't always have that emotional state to it. And people don't realize how important it is to protect their technology. And I'll tell you this last thing. I interviewed once for a company. And she said, "Well, what would you do to protect my manufacturing?" I said, "A lot, but beyond what you think. Remove the labels from your equipment or cover them up. Put cameras on them in addition to protecting it by microsegmentation or access control lists or packet inspection. Don't think just the ordinary. Think beyond that box. Physical controls to the place. Because not only do you have to protect it from a network stance and a cyber stance, but physical and other means. So people don't realize and you of all people definitely understand that, right? The gap that's there that people don't comprehend.
I, I think people want to pretend, and I did too, by the way, that want to pretend that there's good guys and bad guys in the world, and most people are good guys with nuance. And I'll tell you, I spent a long time, an embarrassingly long time believing that. Where in my time in the military and in the NSA, not only did I did sort of industrial control systems, but at the same time, I had other traditional mission sets, including counterterrorism and signals development and other things. And shit, like talking as an American in Iraq and Afghanistan, I looked at it as, hey, that kid wanting to shoot at my guys, he probably watched his dad get drone striked or some shit. Like there's balance. So let's not pretend evil and non-evil. There's just nuance of everybody comes up in their world, everybody comes up in their way of thinking, and there's nuance. And for a long time, I was like, "There's no real evil in the world." I wanted to like rationalize it. There's no real evil. It's just nuance. And then I watched during the pandemic certain state actors break into pharmaceutical clients of ours for not the purpose of stealing the vaccine. If you did, that's fine. People are like, that's bad. And don't get me wrong, I'll try to stop them. That's my job. But like, if China, Russia, Iran, whoever, North Korea is trying to use their intelligence services to steal the vaccine for their people, that's why their intelligence services exist.
Yeah, well,
That's a good use of it.
that's an
That's a good
economic
use
thing.
of it.
That's about money.
But what did we see them doing? Trying to manipulate the vaccine, trying
Oh,
to
really?
hurt people,
Oh,
not steal
that's
it,
not
trying
good.
to hurt people. And I was like, motherfucker, there are evil people. Like you're just targeting civilians. This is not a discussion. And by the way, I was in the military. I love the military. Don't get me wrong. Bleed red, white, and blue. There's more symbols on my arms for each military unit I was in than I'd care to count. But why did I leave the U.S. military? Because we started doing some shady shit, and it wasn't like of our own accord, but it was, hey, let's go. Hey, Captain Lee, how do you do X, Y, and Z against AA site? Like, why are we targeting that site? Well, that site serves power to an integrated air defense system that we need to take down. Like, then just take down the integrated air defense system. No, 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 no. We're going to take down that power site. I'm like, but off that power site is also that local community, but it's a valid military target. I'm like, no, that's civilian infrastructure. No, that's a valid military target. I'm like, no, you can walk across the unit, walk across the base, find a pilot. He'll sober up in 6 hours and you can drop a bomb on the IADs. You don't need to cyber anything. And so I think most people lose the nuance here of thinking we're just the good guys. There is a desire by every state out there, including us, and I don't say every state. I'm sure the Vatican isn't like thinking about it, but most states,
But you don't
most
know that
states,
for sure.
you don't know,
The
you don't know, you
Illuminati
don't
are
know.
in charge, but anyway.
But
Yeah.
but there are a wide variety of state actors who go, but we're the good guys, so that's okay, but this isn't. And I usually come down the side of civilian infrastructure ought to be off limits. If I'm in uniform, shoot me. If they're in uniform, shoot them. We know what we signed up for. We chose to sign up for it. This isn't a draft. Civilian infrastructure, stay out. So one of the reasons I got out was I'd like to protect civilian infrastructure because again, my kids deserve to grow up in a world with safe lights, water, manufactured good, etc. And if you can't side with civilians, I don't know what side you're on.
And Rob, it's exactly, when I wrote that paper, I was saying to myself, what people don't understand. Even, and I'm gonna guess, even the people attacking whatever nation state they are, whatever, they don't realize the cascading effect of what happens. You turn off the electric, food spoils, medical equipment doesn't work, then you have sanitation issues, then people start getting sick, and then it goes cascading exponentially into a world of hate. People are going to die by the
Mhm.
thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands. If we ever lose our electric grid, we're going to have some serious issues that I don't even want to think about how bad it will be.
There's a lot of there's a lot of truth in what you just said. I I don't like when people are, and I'm not saying you're doing this. I'm using what you just said to launch off. There's a lot of people that want to fear monger. Buy my product, do my services because the world's going to end. And I usually tell people the threat is worse than you realize, but not as bad as you want to imagine. There's some stupid stuff out there you don't need to freak out about. I had a talk one time with Ted Koppel and what's the guy, Tom Siebel, about EMPs hitting the electric system. I was like, guys, stop. Like that's not the issue. But at the same time, there's a lot of bury your head in the sand. Life is okay. Like life is a lot more fragile than you realize. Let's take a look at Australia. Australia's been doing some good stuff. There's a port operator, won't name them, but you can Google it. There's a port operator that was hit. They're good people. I've gotten to sit down with them, talk to them quite a bit. And when they got hit with ransomware and they had to stop their port operations, people thought the Australian news ran stories about, oh, now we won't get our Christmas presents and stuff on time. Like Christmas presents. What about the insulin coming in on that ship and the kids depending on that? And so there was almost a pharmaceutical shortage, and they averted it by like a week.
Oh,
And
wow.
and people don't realize like how close it was to people dying off the pharmaceuticals not getting into the country, not your Christmas presents. And so I think the industrial world is often discounted and very often yelled at, but very often people don't realize just how dependent they are on it. I mean, operation technology is also in data centers. We work with a very large company you could name, everyone in the planet could name, and they operate a lot of data centers and shipping fulfillment centers around the world. And I asked them about risk management on their shipping facilities because we're protecting a bunch of them. And I said, hey, okay, on your shipment fulfillment facilities, how many do you care about? And they're like, 1 to 5, we don't care. We can lose any 5 and we're okay. I'm like, what happens on 6? And they're like, oh, on 6, the amount of medicine that is shipped through our popular service stops being allowed to deliver within the time that people need it. And we estimate it'd be somewhere on the order of 100,000 deaths.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay.
Wow.
All right.
So,
6 is the number.
so Rob,
Yeah.
think about this, right? And now, by no means am I saying what happened in Baltimore had anything to do with cybersecurity.
Oh, God, it did not.
No, 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 no. But what I'm
Yeah.
saying to
I
you
live
is,
in Maryland. The
yeah,
crazies are out
yeah.
to
But what I'm
get us
saying
all.
to you is, think about all the people now that are impacted by the collapse of that bridge. The
Mhm.
amount of stuff that comes. So Baltimore is supposed to be one of the most major ports in the
It's
country.
the ninth. It's the ninth most popular port. The supply chain is now absolutely backed up, and it is
Yes,
100%
exactly.
impacting people. And it was through. Well, I'm not even going to opine on it, but either way, I will say, and I know you're not taking it this angle, but I do feel I need to say it. The amount of people that wanted to add a cyber angle to it ought to be ashamed of themselves.
There's
Oh, I
nothing
know. It's
supporting that.
crazy.
A bridge is not built to survive a loaded ship hitting it head on. But it's insane to me then when people are like, oh, the infrastructure was bad. I'm like, what would you want
No,
us to
no,
design?
No,
no.
no, no.
And there's been the Joes and a couple other people in the world that have come out
See, Joe?
going, was there a cyber? No, Joe Weiss. And others being like, was there a cyber angle? I was like, stop, dude.
There's
Like,
Yeah.
nothing is even remotely out there. But my angle was not about cyber. It was about the impact of the supply chain because of what
yes.
happened to that bridge. And
Yep.
people don't realize whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's a collapse of a bridge because of infrastructure wasn't built correctly, whether it's a boat hitting into it. This is no different from the issue is if electric grid collapses, it's a cascading effect that causes medical issues. It causes food, feast, famine, everything.
Well, what amazed me was it's over 10 years ago now when we had Hurricane Sandy
Yeah.
here hitting the New York area. I mean, certainly it was inconvenient. The power went out. My house was out for like 2 weeks, whatever. Spotty everywhere. But what amazed me was how, like, when the electricity stopped flowing and like the trucks stopped running and you couldn't get gas and food wasn't coming in and everything, it was like within days we're like, are we going third world here? Like the supermarket shelves are empty. The gas
Yeah.
lines, I mean, after a day or two it happened
Well,
so
people ask me all the
fast.
time. They're like, "Do you have like a bunker? You live in this world? You have a bunker?" And like, for what? I was like, every person, if they're financially able to, should have 2 weeks of food and water storage. Okay. And they're like, "But what about a month?" I'm like, "A month?" They're like, "If the power is out for a month and the banks are out for a month," I'm like, "You're eating your neighbor's dog. Like, there's no
Yeah,
bunker at
yeah.
that. You don't want to live in that world. Like, it's gone." And
Yeah.
we did this war game back when I was on the government side. We did this war game in a certain country that, again, a big ally of ours. We looked at like if we took down just the water utility industry across that country, how long would the country last without being recoverable?
Three
So how
weeks.
long could you go before that country was wiped from history? And it was like 33 days.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
And it
it's
was
quick.
like, it's like 33 days after dysentery. Everyone always talks power, but like the water industry, like dysentery and yellow fever,
Oh
everything sort of sets in. After about 33 days, it wasn't recoverable anymore. It would just be like a national park that people talked about in history.
yeah, I study ancient history. I'm like a Roman history, not other things, and it's like water is life. Water is the key. When at least one set of barbarians came to Rome, they were smart enough to
Yeah.
figure out they went after the aqueducts and they were
Yeah, we
toast. That
we
was it.
we massively abuse our water industry in the United States, and it's a really key
Yeah.
infrastructure.
So think of
Yeah,
yeah. So think of this. I was stuck in Florida for Hurricane Irene. No planes were flying. I'm driving up and I start running out of gas. And I get to a gas station. I'm like, I need gas. They're like, oh, electricity's out. So I can't get gas. Thankfully, I went to the restroom and somebody said, oh, and I had almost no gas. He says, drive about maybe 5, 10 more miles up. The gas stations are open. I pulled in as my car was dying and I got gas. But just the fact that electricity is out caused an issue because I couldn't get gas from a gas pump.
Yeah. Pumps don't work.
yep. It's hyper connected, and so what most Americans need to understand is your infrastructure asset owners and operators do an amazing amount of work that will never be public to keep things reliable. What we also need to understand is we are going through a transformation digitally with connectivity and moving to homogeneous infrastructure from versus heterogeneous and codependence on software stacks that are ubiquitous and so forth, that the attack surface is also exploding. And so both can be true. The asset owners and operators have done an amazing job, and the landscape is changing so fast. We got to layer in security to be able to do something about where we're going. And that somehow is a nuanced topic to be able to capture in policy circles and similar. And so you talked about Davos and Senate and everything else. I most of my time is spent running my company. We got 500 something folks doing operations around the world, but a good portion of my time is spent with policymakers around the world going, you keep talking critical infrastructure, but do you realize that 95% of all the things you've ever done went to the non-revenue generating portion of critical infrastructure, which is IT? And IT is important. Not saying it's not. It's honestly been underutilized and underserved. But in addition to enterprise IT is the enterprise, which is all the plants and all the substations, all the manufacturing sites, etc. And all we've ever done for most of them is try to segment them off and have a firewall. And now that we're connecting up and getting digital transformation, Industry 4.0, or whatever you want to call it, that stuff is not segmented anymore. And you probably want to do more than just try to prevent attacks from happening.
Well, let me ask you this. In the IT world, I mean, IT world again, we talk about critical infrastructure, banks and things, whatever. But really, until recently, a lot of it hasn't been, like life and death. And really, there are one of the reasons we have so many security problems are there aren't standards, there aren't protections built in, there isn't a huge regulatory framework, even though we complain about it all the time. But compared to like the real physical infrastructure side, I mean, you can't. There ain't a lot of startups in the water industry who say we're going to build fast and break things. There are
Mhm.
rules. There's engineering. I mean, are you seeing that being applied to the to the control systems there too, or is that
It's
something that needs more help?
it's well intentioned, but there's got to be a balance. I'm not a regulatory person in the sense that I generally feel that regulation and security are not only not the same thing, but usually are opposite of each other. But you got to have regulation for some of these industries. So some industries have a centralization of big companies that can influence the rest of the industry, and it works really well. Some markets, there's no big companies. So let's take IoT as an example. If you're an IoT manufacturer, you think about time to market and your cost of goods. And so if I can reduce the cost because customers are buying on price, and if I can reduce the time to market, I'm doing that. And if I don't, I may go out of business. And so security presents a barrier. You're going to tell me I need to pay more for this product and slow down my time to market, you'll kill the company. We're done. And so in an IoT market, there's no central players, there's no ability to influence. It's anybody that pops in. Regulation makes a lot of sense. Hey, if you want to sell into the market, you got to do X, Y, and Z. You got to be this tall to ride the ride. Then you can sell your product in the market. It actually can make sense. In the electric industry, we have a lot of regulation, but there's less than 100 investor owned utilities, less than 20 or 30 large public power companies. You can get a bunch of them together. They have the Electric Sector Coordinating Council, and you can go talk to them and say, here's what you want to do. And they'll agree with you and they'll say, let's go do it without regulation. You can influence that center mass. And in the middle, you got like the water industry. You got about 55,000 plus 100ish, but really about 55,000 water utilities of any decent size. That's hard to go talk to each one of them. It's hard to get a central mass. But you don't need to do regulation like the IoT market, but you might want to say, you guys form a council, figure out what you want to do, and we'll hold you accountable to that inside of our requirements. And so each industry kind of takes a different stance. And so I guess to go back to your question, do I think the manufacturers, the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, are putting in products that are making us more secure? No. The answer is no. Some great people at those companies, but the answer is no. But could we say beyond the standards, here's the ride to ride and here's what it means to have a more secure product? Yeah, I think you could, and it would make some impact. But remember, and I'll stop here, but remember, most of the industrial attacks we're worried about are not about product security, which is like an IT mindset. Not bad, by the way, but it is an IT mindset. Most of the concerns we have are about misoperation. If I can open up a circuit breaker to energize or de-energize a substation, so can an adversary. So that living on the land style attacks in IT is the game in OT.
Oh, okay. That's interesting because you see, we think like IT people. It's
Mhm.
like, and there's more living off the land and everything. But vulnerable. Well, of
Well,
course,
that's a good thing.
it's a little cliche, but
You walk into a pipeline and you go, "Oh my god, it's vulnerable," and I go, "Who cares?" And they go, "No, no, 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 it's Windows XP." And I'm like, "Again, who cares?" And that freaks people out at first. Like, no, but it's Windows XP. It's vulnerable. I'm like, but what can you do with it? What outcome can you achieve? I'm not saying it's a good thing. Let's be real. But what's the issue? If I get on an engineer workstation and I know how to reprogram a controller and runtime operations to overpressurize a valve, I don't need a vulnerability to do that. I just need knowledge of the industrial process. And so that's scarier than the vulnerability on the Windows
So
system.
there's three things I'm going to add to that. One, like living off the land, people don't realize the Dracs of the world on the machine with the sub Linux. People don't do anything to patch it. They're patching everything on the computer, but they're not patching the Drac. Two, from an IoT standpoint, everything is almost proprietary, right? There's no like when you have a Windows machine, even like a Macintosh or Apple, you can get an EDR installed and it's mass produced. There's no mass produced for your TV or anything else because it's like a little Linux embedded thing, and nobody's really making security for that, and no one's updating. When's the last time somebody updated their car as they're driving? Oh, let me go update my firmware on my car. Who's doing that? Nobody. So then your car's taking over, and you wonder why. Assuming that somebody really did that, or somebody's looking at your TV or your camera on your TV. Who's updating the firmware to a higher level of security? And then the last thing about these utility companies, it is so hard to find the right people and pay the right people
Yeah.
to maintain that. I am like I was going to Joe. Joe's like, Adam, they're not going to pay for it. I'm like, Joe, we work for an organization. We should get packet inspection. He's like, Adam, they're not going to pay 2.5 million for packet inspection,
This again.
but we'll see people in the stream. And then the other thing I tell people also is watch Joe flip out, PISM. So people don't integrate their physical security with their IT stuff. Physical security integration management. I'm sorry, physical security integration with your actual IT stuff. People don't have that, and they don't know a single source. Why is the person VPNing in when they swipe their card? And maybe you think I'm crazy, but I think these integrations can help a little bit.
Well, of course they can. And so I think all the discussions are always what's the return on investment relative, right? And so
Risk versus
there's not a
reward.
bad idea out there. There's not a bad idea out there in security. Great. It's all great ideas. Let's just start there. All great. What's the one that's going to return the most value for what I'm putting into it? And maybe I got the opportunity to do 2, maybe 3. I don't have opportunities to do 20 critical controls. I don't have opportunities to do all of NIST cybersecurity
And
framework.
risk versus reward, right, Rob?
Yeah, what's the 1 to 3 things I'm doing? And I got to tell you, it's hard when you're an executive at an infrastructure company because you hear from the FBI on every field office that's in your service territory about the 2 or 3 things you should do. You hear from the DOE, the 2 or 3 things you should do. You hear from the CISA, the 2 or 3 things you should do. You hear from NRC if you have nuclear about 2 or 3 things you should do. You hear from TSA if you have pipelines, 2 or 3 things you should do. You hear from every vendor out there the 2 or 3 things you should do. And you get it all together and you're hearing 50, 60 things that are disjointed and you go, I don't know what to do.
Prohibitively
And so
expensive.
We're used to, we see that in IT too, but
yeah.
everyone's got a different opinion when you got multiple
Yeah.
auditors. But I mean, something that there's a bit of a consensus on, like in IT. The modern thought is like, okay, and we had, our when we had Ryan Westman on talking about stuff, some of the basics is like, look, if you had to boil it down to 2 or 3 things, what should you be doing? You got to be careful with you got to get your vulnerabilities under control. You got to, you got to get your endpoints under control, protected, and you got to monitor. Okay, you do that, you got a decent security program, basically, more or less.
Yeah,
In the IT
1 out of
world,
3 of those would be good in OT. Yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, what would you say to focus on in OT? Not necessarily one of them. I mean, what would you say are
Yeah,
the
no.
important
So
points?
I mean, I've taught at SANS for 10 years now
Mhm.
outside of my role at Dragos. And my students would always come to the same question. Rob, we're learning all this cool stuff. What are a couple things? So Tim Conway and I sat down and did this exercise. Tim Conway's beautiful human being over at SANS Institute. He was a grid operator for 20 years, running electric operations, and then did security. Just I get all the publicity, but Tim's the brains. And what Tim and I did is we said, look, we got bias. Everyone's got bias. We all walk in with bias about what we think is good. And how many times we heard that's a good control or bad control? It's like it's not an ethics discussion. It's what control is relevant to what we're trying to do. So what we did is we sat down and looked at every single industrial security attack that's ever happened, all that we had access to. My data from Dragos, his data, our personal cases, everything that we could find. And we said, what security controls from an OT perspective were useful in all of them? Not that you couldn't find some useful ones in one offs, but what were the security controls useful in all of them?
The
Because
bang
those
for
would be
your buck, where's that?
Yep. Where's the bang
Yeah.
for your buck? And it ended up being 5. And so we published SANS ICS 5 critical controls on these are the 5 controls that have worked every single time in every industrial attack we've ever seen. And there are not only companies but countries picking that up. Like Australia is using it now in the ACSC for like when they go do assessments of critical infrastructure, they go use the 5 critical controls. And to me, that's how you move the needle. Because if you come in with here's NIST cybersecurity framework, or here's 62443, or here's CBGs, or here's whatever, it's too much for anybody to consume outside of maybe the Fortune 50. And so for everybody else, it's here's 5 things, here's a strategy, here's why we did it, here's the math that you can check if you want to go down this path. And we've seen that return a lot of value for folks. And I would just say from an OT perspective, the easiest way to define the 5 versus what you're talking about is in IT, and this is This is hand waving, okay?
Mhm.
But in IT, you deal with systems and data. How do I protect the system? How to protect the data? I want endpoint protection on the system. I want vulnerability management on the system. If somebody gets on and escalates privileges and steals off of the system, it's a bad day. How do I protect the data? Encryption at rest, encryption in transit, DLP, et cetera, et cetera. How do I protect the data? In the world of OT, we care about systems of systems and physics. I don't really care that the engineer workstation is vulnerable. Go compromise it. Now make the lights blink. I don't know that you can. But if you know how to access the engineer workstation, system one, in such a way to modify the logic on system two in the correct way, in such a way that causes a valve to open, a pressure relief valve not to close, or a circuit breaker to open when it shouldn't, system one impacting system two with a physical consequence, system three, that's a bad day. And so we care less about systems and data and more about systems and physics, which implies not only industrial knowledge, but it's actually more network. Usually in an IT environment, you do endpoints, and then if you have spare resources, you do the network. In OT, it's do the network because that's systems of systems. If you got spare resources, do the endpoints.
Wow.
And that's a big hand wave, but that's kind of the way to think about it.
Okay, so when we in IT, I think traditional cyber, talk about living off the land, because you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned it before too, we talk about, okay, you send the phishing email to someone, and then you're on their machine. And then you're like, okay, now I'm going to do that. I'm going to use some tools, and I'm going to try to get on a domain controller. I'm going to try to get,
Mm-hmm.
domain credentials. And then I'm going to try to go and see if I can get into this application and find a way. We call that moving around, living off the land. And through IT systems, it's almost sounding to me from what you were saying that the concept in OT of living off the land is still getting movement, but it's a little bit different in what you're
But yeah,
doing.
but it's the same and
It's
so
the same end.
here's this is gonna sound really arrogant OT stuff, and it's not meant to be, but like
Okay.
OT is everything that is an IT plus.
Plus.
And so the
Okay.
stuff that you bring in expertise from IT is not irrelevant, but you got to learn what that plus is before you apply it. And so all the things you just mentioned about domain controllers, we got domain controllers. We got domain controllers in the plant. It's got DCS, distributed control system access, and so forth. The domain controller is relevant. The PowerShell movement that we're talking about and the lateral movement or Cobalt Strike getting dropped in, cool, relevant. But then there's an effect.
Then it's like the
And before
PLC,
we
right?
care, before we
How do you
care,
control the
it's got to be an
PLC?
effect. Yeah, and so like
I
talk about
see.
living on the land, there might be domain controller down to engineer workstation. Then what's the engineer workstation living on the land? It's using the Siemens TIA engineer workstation portal to program a controller that has from run mode switch to program mode, and now I need to know what to do, but I can't just go throw code at it. I got to know what the physical profile is to then be able to do the logic correctly to go, like you can't just go in and be like open a circuit breaker. Like what register are you talking to and what part of the physical process and what does it mean? And so like a lot of these like DEF CON presentations and stuff are like, I own this PLC, and we're like, nobody fucking cares. But when it's, hey, I own this PLC with the knowledge of how this environment runs, so I know how to manipulate this register and what value to give it to cause a physical consequence. I
Well,
don't care if it had a vulnerability or not. That's scary.
so you need to know IT. You need to know um, about the extra infrastructure, whether it's a PLC or the control station. So you have to do a lot of reconnaissance in order for you to like what commands do I type?
Yeah.
AC dash 7 dash whatever it
Yep.
is.
Yep.
You have to know the nomenclature for that program,
Okay.
that language to control those things.
Yes, yes, and it's specific to that site usually. Now we're getting into a class of capabilities that are not site specific, which is scary. And so, not enough time to go into it here, but there's a capability called Pipe Dream. Pipe Dream. We covered it at Dragos. People can go research it. It's the first cross industry capability, and that one's scary. Where essentially this software, first of all, we have protocols like Modbus TCP and stuff like that, and OPC, and it knows how to use those. Okay, great. But then it also knows how to use Code Assist. Code Assist is a software framework that has been embedded into like every PLC these days.
Oh wow.
And so instead of knowing this Siemens controller versus this Emerson controller, if you just know that version of Code Assist, you can just do it. And so that's what makes it scary. You can just be this ubiquitous kind of technology, but you still got to know, oh, register 2 is a servo motor. And if I switch it to a 20, that doesn't do anything, but a 50 in this context allows me to. And you hit on it with the centrifuge. P1 centrifuges and the TANs. If I wanted to manipulate the P1 centrifuges to cause physical destruction, I needed to know physics of that environment, not cyber.
That's true, right?
And
The
if
warping.
I knew as an example that I could take it down to, let's say, 47 hertz and then pipe it up to 1410 hertz, and then maybe I dropped it down to 1210 hertz and did that in a certain cycle every day over the course of 3 months, that it would cause
Destroy
a
it.
physical degradation of the centrifuge to where it exploded out of its canister, that'd be pretty cool. But knowing this programming language or the cyber component of it would never
Wasn't
solve
enough.
for that.
Yeah.
But if I knew that and then knew how to do it through cyber, that's world ending.
That's
And
funny.
that's what we're
Yeah.
talking
Oh,
about.
That's the
okay.
physics. And that was if I look. You would know more than I would, but I know if I understand correctly, it was do it really slow, then really fast, then really slow, then really fast.
Yep. And if you know that environment, because some environments can handle that. Some environments, I can go open up every valve possible to cause an overpressurization event, and they got a safety system that just won't allow it to happen, and it's okay. But in some environments, I hit certain. It's I got to know the code of the environment. I got to know, well, if I hit A, B, C, D, E, F, this will violate the physical profile. But if I don't know that, I can punch crap into a system all day long, and maybe it's allowed digitally, but it may not be allowed physically.
So Rob, I need a
Oh,
movie review from you. Die Hard.
Yeah, yeah, not possible, but not possible in the way they articulated it, but articulated policymakers' concerns. I mean,
okay.
look, there's a lot of different movies out there, Blackhead, all the rest of them, and like
Oh, Black Hat was great. I
yeah,
liked it.
No,
there's always
look.
this nuance, and I hate it. I hate to be that guy, but we are that people on OT. There's always this nuance where like that's not possible, and like, but could you kill a lot of people? Oh yeah, you could kill a lot of people. You got to do this instead. So it's almost like we're talking out both sides of our mouth. But like the way Ted Koppel, as an example, wrote a book called Lights Out, and I to this day the technical side of me will be like, that's stupid. It can't work like that. And then like a congressman would be like, but could you achieve the same outcome another way? I'm like, oh yeah, you could totally kill a lot of people. And it's
It's
it comes
theatrical
off.
liberty. It's theatrical
Okay.
liberties that they take in the movies. It's
Yeah,
theatrical. The
it's
end
it's
result
usually
is
not the
real,
outcome.
but
It's
All
usually
right.
not the outcome. It's the way they choose to get there. Like,
yeah.
oh God, you could not do that. And we get caught
Okay.
up in the details sometime. And yeah.
Okay. So let me ask this. I'm going to bring in a different movie because I think this, if I get it, this could be the movie. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
Much better.
Showing my
Much better.
age when
Much better.
like they hack through the console,
Yep.
they get whatever, and then but actually it's before they do that. But they said they knew exactly where to hit us. You can
Yep.
get in, but you have to know where to hit them
Star
when you're
Trek,
in. Is
Star
that
Wars,
it?
Jurassic Park. Yeah, those would be the
Okay.
better one.
Oh,
Jurassic Park
Jurassic
had
Park. Oh yeah.
Jurassic Park, they had one IT guy monitoring everything. They locked him out of the systems, and they were able to physically control the gates and everything. And the great Jurassic Park, Star Wars. Everyone says that the blast port where Luke shot with the X-wing to blow up that doesn't make any sense. That was a Mulligan or whatever. Like no, it actually makes a lot of sense that there's a point in the system for exhaust and
Very
similar,
vulnerable.
and that in any complex system there's going to be something you can hit, but you better spend a lot of research to figure it out, and a lot of Bothans had to die to figure out what that port
That sounds
was.
like
And
Top
so
Gun Maverick.
yeah,
The Empire has like faster than light travel, but they don't have drive encryption. But whatever,
not only
that's a
that,
whole
but
other thing.
let's also be real on two fronts. One, there's a lot of civilians and contractors that died on the Death Star. The rebels are terrorists. Okay. Second of all, the
Oh, come on, that's
the
from
they
Clerks. You see that movie? Come on, right?
okay. First of all,
Anyway.
very much in line with that. Of like the Jedi take kids when they're young from their parents by
That's some
like
creepy
buying them to
stuff.
like turn it. All right, little cultish. I remember fighting fucking jihadists. It's similar, but when you look
Yeah,
at
you can't understand why Anakin would be like totally screwed up in the head or
yeah,
anything.
a little bit,
Yeah.
but
Anyway,
also the piece to your point when you look at like complex systems. If you are able to study any complex system long enough, you will find a flaw. And if you do that long enough, you will find that flaw to be digitally done, or it may not be on design, but later on, do upgrades, it may become digitally vulnerable. And that is what we're experiencing all across industrial. Of there's really safe systems, and they were designed safely, and you could not do anything to them to hurt people. But then we decided to stick an IP address on it to make it more accessible, and we're like, oh, now you can.
But how many of these situations are really layer 7, right? Really at the layer 8, I'm sorry, layer 8, at that keyboard level where somebody social engineered or opened up the wrong firewall rule or the wrong container or didn't put the right password on it, or I mean,
I mean, there's a
some of
lot
these are
of it.
layer 8, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of it. Like, I mean, I don't know how many. And this was I'm stealing this quote from Austin, one of our pen testers, but there's a lot of like temporary any rules, and
Yes.
there's nothing more permanent in the universe than a temporary any rule.
Yes.
And
Correct.
Yeah.
so there's a lot of that out there. But even if you got rid of all that, the adversaries we're seeing are finding they're not doing anything creative. They're not sophisticated. It's the vulnerability comes out. They know you're going to take at least 30 days to patch it. They can reverse it to find the exploit within a day or two, and they go target the VPN concentrator you're
That's a good
using.
question, right?
Okay.
It's yeah.
How many of them are 0 days?
Not, I mean, now visibility is always an issue, right? But from our collection, not many. And look, I was on the offensive side doing stuff against other people's infrastructure, and there was no point in my day dealing with HR and training and everything else and every commander that wanted a briefing. There was no point in my day that was like, how do I look fancy in the Kaspersky report? Like that was not my requirement. My requirement was get the job done and move on to the other 30 missions you have. And so what is fancy? It's an operational risk. If I look really good and fancy and you catch me, you're calling in a big time IR firm. But if I look basic as shit and you happen to catch me, you're like, some stupid criminal actor, move on. And so you never want to be more advanced than necessary from an operational risk perspective. So a lot of the adversaries don't need to do the cool, interesting things that people think about. They just do the fundamentals and they're winning.
Yep. Keep it simple,
Yep.
stupid type of
No.
thing.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Something else I wanted to ask about. Now, we're talking about getting in and knowing what to do.
Mhm.
And then Adam was talking a little bit about reconnaissance. So I wanted to ask, say someone, gets in, they pop whatever, they get into the, plant, whatever it is. And let's assume that they don't just get the plans off IT systems, whatever. Is there a way to do reconnaissance to learn what those key circuit breakers are, what those key things are? Can someone, once they're in,
Yeah.
figure out
And,
what they need to do?
and we see a lot of this actually. And so when the US government comes out, then sometimes they're overhyped, but they go, oh, a state actor broke in and we're very concerned about what they're doing. It's usually not they're going to do something tomorrow. It's usually they're still in the type of data useful to do
Yeah.
attacks, and that may take a while. And so in an industrial environment, if I see somebody coming in and stealing passwords or whatever, I'm like, okay, whatever. Maybe it's impactful, maybe it's not, but usually not. But if I see somebody coming in and taking screenshots of the human machine interface about how it's logically constructed, if I see people stealing the engineering diagrams of how the integrator physically set it up, if I see them stealing the data historian about the set points that have historically been done in that environment, I look at that and go, not a lot of intellectual property value there. They know what they're doing, and they're stealing information that can help them design an attack. So that's the kind of stuff we look for.
Okay.
And so there is a set of engineering data. Most of it is in your environment. Some of it is in your integrator's environment. That when taken and combined together is reconnaissance that someone can use to design an attack that would cause physical consequence if the environment allows physical consequence.
Wow. This is absolutely fascinating. I got to
Well,
tell
it's
you,
fun,
I,
right?
I, I
Like, I
knew
mean,
OT was different, but this is really,
OT's
really
cool.
intense.
OT's fun.
Cool.
And look,
Wow.
there's a lot of things that people should get excited about their life, and IT security is also cool and interesting. But I gotta tell you, OT's fun. Like, and it's, but you gotta be ready for it in the sense that IT, you're gonna work high frequency, low impact. You're gonna deal with a lot of shit. Not necessarily one of them is gonna bring down the country, but it's gonna be cool stuff. A lot of it, a lot
It's
of
a niche.
experience.
It's a niche and a niche and a niche.
Yeah, but OT tends to be lower frequency. It's not low, but it's lower frequency, high impact. I've taken a couple of cases that are now in books and movies, but I only took a couple of those cases. A good IT incident responder is taking cases every month, and so it's low frequency, high impact. And so you got to know what you want to sign. I've had IR folks that join Dragos going, I want to do instant response and industrial. I'm like, cool. And then after like 6 months, quit going, there's not enough cases here. I'm
Really?
like, this is a lot of industrial cases. And they're like, but we're taking one every month. My last firm, we took 5 cases a month. I'm like, how many people do you want to take down the power grid?
Yeah.
It's
Well, that's old school before
balance.
ransomware,
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
before ransomware. Like, but that's the thing. But also, if you're in IT, sometimes you can get mundane. Of like, this is the 30th ransomware case I've seen. They're doing the exact same
Yeah.
thing.
Listen.
Dropper, Cobalt Strike, whatever else. It's like, yeah, it happens. But anyways, it's different. And so I don't want to paint it like it's just this rosy field of join. But OT to me is a lot of fun. It just makes you think differently.
You bring up an interesting point, right? You want to learn IR. You do like the OPSEC or the offensive security cert, or you do try hack me. But if you want to do OT, you got to really dig down deep, download manuals and stuff like that. And
OT security is a specialization, dude. And so I know this is like not, I don't know, I feel like anti community when I say this next statement. And I've built my career on SANS and teaching and welcoming people in this community. But OT security is not for starters. Period, in my opinion. If you played a video game that has skill trees, you always go do your fundamentals and then you specialize. And it's the same thing. Go fundamentals in engineering, go fundamentals in IT security, go fundamentals in something, and then specialize in OT security and bring in your skill set. I don't think OT security is a place to start. Just by volume of stuff you deal with, it's a specialization on top of skill sets. And it's different. And some of your skills will be useful, some of them won't. But don't pretend we're starting Star Wars Galaxies. You want to go be a creature handler up front or some shit. Like it's go specialize.
so I'm gonna say I think you're wrong about one part. I
Mm.
think it's a specialization and a specialization. I mean, not only do you have to know the basics and fundamentals, but then you really need to know a lot about IR, and then you need to know a lot about OT, and then you need to know a lot about that specific industry that
Mm.
you're working on, whether it's gas or electric, because they all have different equipment. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
really, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
you're becoming like you're layering the level of specialization.
Yes. No, absolutely. I get called all the time to go to. I got this morning. I got asked to come keynote this conference, and it looked interesting. Thousands of people would have been cool. And I asked them what they want me to talk about, and they're like AI, and I'm like, it's not me, dude. And they're like, what? No, you're a cybersecurity expert. I'm like, I don't know what that means. They're like, no, you're a renowned cybersecurity expert. I'm like, no, I know industrial security, and even that is broad. What I mean by that is I know electric, mining, data center, pharma, water, maybe some oil and gas, cybersecurity. I've never been in certain paper mills before. Like, it's subset of a subset to your point. And I think the days of pretending that people are cybersecurity experts like died with like Bruce Schneier, type skill sets. And what I mean by that is if you were coming up in the 80s and 90s, you were a cybersecurity expert. If you're coming up now out of college, whatever else in 2024, you can't be a cybersecurity expert. The field is too broad. You can be application security expert. You can be an AWS cloud expert versus a Rackspace cloud expert. But if you want to say that OT is just a security skill set, it's like, man,
That's
no,
still too broad. And
too
look,
broad.
in this industry, I don't know if you know May Kemper. She has her own podcast and she does other work. And I did her podcast. Was it today? Yes, I don't remember. But we were talking about, and I said, May, we in this industry are very self-deprecating. We put ourselves down constantly. But the reason why we really do that is because we really know how, like let me give you an analogy. I did martial arts. I was a white belt. I learned some stuff. I became a green belt or blue belt, whatever, and I thought I knew freaking everything. And then when I became a black belt, I realized I know shit.
Yeah,
I know nothing. And
that's
this
that
is
during Kurg effect or whatever. But
yeah,
it's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. The more you, and that's what I've never called myself an expert on shit. And here's my arrogance. If there's a list out there of like the top 5 cybersecurity experts of ICS. I bet you I'm on that list. I bet you I am. I wouldn't put myself on the list because I know people
Yeah.
like Tim Conway, and Tim Conway is not going to be publicly on that list. But if I got some weird ass questions about how digital relays work at a substation in a certain operating environment, I'm calling Tim because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. And so it's just the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know shit. And so I think
Yeah.
it's spot on.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. It's funny, like you said, you have 500 people. Where in the world did you find
Oh, you
500
build them.
people, or how
Yeah,
many
you
have?
build
How
them.
many
Yeah. You got to
you
build your
got to do
army.
this? They just don't exist,
Yeah,
right?
there
You
was
know.
probably, let's say there was, and I'm just making up numbers here. Let's say there was 100 people in the ICS security community at one point that were really the experts. I probably hired 50 of them out the gate. Like
So,
we centralized and monopolized the talent early on, and then we said go build courses internally. Built this
right.
thing called Dragos Academy of this training, this documentation, this whatever. We built our tech. We're a technology company. It was how do I codify the knowledge in the platform? People come onto us and be like, "Do you use AI?" And I'm like, "Yes, actual intelligence. We codify their
Actual,
expertise into this." And so,
nice.
like,
There we go.
our whole thing is how do we build tech and training to where I can take an 18-year-old at a high school and turn them into an OT security analyst within 6 months. That's the goal. This idea of hiring these purple colored unicorns with stripes and stars on their ass is silly.
You ever see Boiler Room?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anybody like we're hiring? Anybody here have a Series 7? I have a Series 7. Get the fuck out. Why?
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
we don't hire, we build them. And that's the point
Yep.
I think you're making, right? I'm not saying that you wouldn't hire
You have to
somebody
build them.
who knew it, but your specialty, like there are certain things you can't learn, right, in school.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like we say the same thing about some of the, when you work for a nation state, there's skills you're never going to learn unless you do it in a nation state. It's kind of the
Yeah.
same thing with your company. You're never going to get that education anywhere else but your company, or
Yeah.
if you did it some other company similar to that. And I'd be
Yep.
willing to bet you there's very few companies. I don't know any other companies that do it, but I'm sure there are. And
We
unless,
we have competitors on any one aspect of what we do,
but not all of
but
them.
we don't have a single competitor that does tech services and intel. And so if you want to do tech services and intel ICS specific, you're coming to Dragos. And and so to your point, where are we taken from? Asset owner operator community? No, thank you. I'm not stealing from our customers. Bad blood in a small community. Don't do that.
Mhm.
Yep.
And so for us is 100% build them. I want people that got curiosity. I want people that got some level of expertise of something else they want to bring to the party. And I think a lot of companies talk about that, but they gotta actually put that into real practice. And I see companies on stage saying we build, and then you go to their HR system and for the job sites, and it's like we want a new analyst with 3 years of experience and a SAN cert. I'm like, that's not a new analyst. Or we want a 7-year incident responder who also has 5 years of malware reverse engineering with also 4 years of threat intelligence experience. We want to pay them $55,000 a year. I'm like, good luck. And then we go, there's 300,000 jobs unfilled. I'm like, you got 280,000 jobs that are unfillable.
It's like on LinkedIn when they
Yeah.
say, I want somebody with 15 years cybersecurity experience for a junior role.
Yeah, yeah. Or I want someone with 5 years experience in this technology that's 3 years old.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other
Yeah.
discussion.
We're going on a rant, but this is what you get for a security
Yeah.
cocktail hour. So it's
Yeah, that's great, especially towards the end. It starts getting
yeah.
spicy. But no, but we are kind of at the end of our time. We've gone for a while. This has been absolutely fascinating. I really didn't know much about it, but
Oh, you
this is
tell all your guests
cool.
that they're pretty. But look, I appreciate hanging
Well,
out with
yeah,
you guys. And look, for people that are interested in industrial security, the water's warm. Come on in, but don't have illusions of grandeur. It's hard work, but industrial is fun. OT is fun, but spend time, take all your expertise, value it, but put it in the corner for a second. Walk into the plant and go, how is it made here? What are you trying to do? What's the mission of this site? Then pull from your tool chest of how can I help you? But if you come in with here's the playbook, I guarantee you're going to fail. And if you can take that mindset of like, if you find somebody to sit down and watch that TV show How It's Made, I think it's on the Discovery Channel, whatever it is, and their face lights up, hire that kid. That's the industrial
cool.
world. You'll be fine.
I'll tell you
All
this, Rob.
right.
I wanted to say what Joe said. This has been fascinating, and not because we tell everyone they're pretty. There are a lot of different pretty people, but this is the first time I think we've ever touched on this subject at this level, and it is fascinating because I did. You like how many people can I go to really find out this information? And I'm being very transparent here, so thank you very much. I've learned a lot, and you kind of made me a little bit more interested than I was before. So thank you.
That's awesome. Well, Joe, Adam, I appreciate y'all. I appreciate you inviting me on, and good luck on it all. And for everyone else, like and subscribe and show your content makers that you love
Yes.
them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Rob. Adam, always
Thank you
fun
very
with you.
much.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone, for listening.